So let's go ahead and create an option menu for our protein tracker application. For our option menu, we're going to want to have, just like I had shown in the slides, a settings and a help. Since we've already had created our help screen and we have our settings screen, we want to make it so that we can go to our settings and help screen. And right now we'll just implement going to our settings screen when someone clicks on the settings button. So before we can hook this up, the first thing that we'll need to do is actually create the menu layout file that will display when we show the menu. So in order to do that, all we have to do is go into our res folder, and we can do new, other, and choose Android XML file. And just like we had done with some of the other XML files, we're going to do the same thing here, and we're going to select the type that we want. So we want a menu, which is automatically going to put it in the right folder for us. And then we'll give a file name for this menu, and we'll just call this main menu. Then I'll click finish here, and you'll see it's already created this for us. And again, we're given this choice between using the XML view or this layout view. If we look at the XML for it, it's just simple XML that's created for us so far. And we'll flip back and forth between the two so you can see. This is another one example where I prefer to use the layout because it's actually pretty easy to use here. So it's real simple to create our menu. All that we're going to need to do is click add, and then we have group or item here. I'm going to show you real quickly how we could use the group. We had talked about using the checkable, but for this we're just going to use items. But let's go ahead and create a group because it won't hurt to have one. So we're going to use a group here, and then we're going to, this is where we can set this checkable behavior to all, single, none, and that will control whether it's a radio button or not. If we said all were checkable, then it would be checkboxes. None, of course, there would be nothing there, and single would make a radio button. So we can then add our items to this group, and if you look at this XML, you can see it's just created a group, and then let's add some menu items to that group. We'll click add. We're going to create the new item in the selected group. We're going to do the same thing. Oops, actually we don't want to create a submenu yet. We just want to create an item inside that group. And now we have two items in the group. And if you look at that XML, you would see just simple, very simple, straightforward XML here, a group and then two items in it. Now we need to do more than just have those items. So we actually need to make the item have some information like the title, and we could use an icon here. So let's go and let's fill this out a little bit. The first thing we need is a title, so let's make our first one settings, and then we're going to ignore the condensed for now because we're going to assume it's going to fit on the screen. You could put an icon here. We're not going to do one for this one, but for your option menu, you can use icons. For a context menu, you're not going to have an icon. And then here we could set each individual item to be checkable or not, and whether or not it's checked. So it's actually really easy. We'll put help here, and then these are our IDs, and I'm going to change the ID on this. I'm going to make this settings menu item, and then I'm going to change this one to help menu item so we can identify it very easily. Okay, and now we can just save our menu, and that's it. We've got our menu created, and this should work. There's really not much to it. We'll look at the XML for this one time, and you can see it's all pretty straightforward, pretty much what you would expect here. And then now we have to actually hook this up to be able to use this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our main activity here, and then what we want to do is overload a special method that our activity calls when it goes to create a menu item. This is for the option menu. It'll be when the user hard clicks the hard menu item on the phone or the device. And so the method that we're going to overload here is on create options menu. So we can do public void on create. Actually, we can just do on create options menu. And then it fills in for us. And then what we need to do here is basically, we don't need to call the super in this case. I guess we can leave that call in there though. But we need to take the menu that we have created and we need to inflate that menu and then draw it. And so we use a special class in Android called the menu inflator. And what that will do is it'll read that XML resource and then it will basically inflate it into our activity. It'll just like we do with views here, like when we do the set content view and it takes that XML and then it generates a tree hierarchy of classes of objects. The inflator menu inflator basically does the same thing, except it does it for menus. So we'll declare a menu inflator, and we'll need to import this in. And then we will set this to, and if you just call get menu inflator on our activity, then we'll get a copy of the menu inflator. And then we can do menu inflator dot inflate, and then here we just pass in our resource, which will be r dot menu dot main menu. And then here we pass in the menu that we want to inflate it. Android is passing us the menu so that we could add items to the menu. And then we're going to go ahead and add them there. And then we return true to say that we actually have successfully handled that event. And what we could have done here is basically, if we had a hierarchy of classes, because it's giving us the menu on this override, we can basically add our menu item and then call the super menu item if we wanted to. In this case, we don't actually care because we know we're at the bottom of the hierarchy, so we don't even need to call super at all. But if you had a hierarchy of activities, and let's say that your base class was adding some menu items, but then this more specific class wanted to add some more, we could easily do that with this kind of an architecture that they've given us. And so now we should be able to test this out. We're going to expect that we're going to show the menu when the user clicks the menu. So let's go ahead and let's start up our virtual machine here, our Android AVD. And I'm going to start it this way so that we can get the right size screen. Okay, so now we have our AVD launched, and then we can do a run. And we can run our application. We're going to expect that we can click menu now and see that menu. All right, so now our application is launched, and then I'm going to hit this menu button, and there we go. We see settings and help. Now, if I click this, it doesn't actually do anything because that's the next step we need to do is now we need to hook up this menu so that right now we're just going to hook it up so settings does something. So let's go ahead and look at how to do that. If we go back into our Eclipse project here in our main activity, what we're going to do is we're going to override another method, which is an unOption item selected. And that is going to be called whenever any menu item is selected. From that method, we're going to choose which option item was selected and then do something specifically based on that. So let's go ahead and override that method. We're going to do on option item selected. Okay, and then what we're going to do inside here is we're going to need to get which menu item it is, and based on what it is, do our action. So the way that we're going to do that is switch on the item ID. So we'll do a switch statement, and we're going to do item.get item ID. And what that will do is give us the ID of that particular menu item that was selected. And then we can do a case, and we can do our r.id. We should have a settings menu item. Okay. So now, if it's a settings menu item, then what we're going to want to do here is launch settings activity. And then if it's not, we don't actually care. So our default is just not going to do anything here, since this is the only thing that we're hooking up in this case. Now, we already have some code that launches the settings menu item. So let's go ahead, or launches the preferences screen. So let's go ahead and take that code. We had hooked up our on-click in a previous module to automatically go to our preferences so that we could check our preferences. And we can just use that same exact code, basically, here to launch our activity. If you remember, we said we create a new intent, and then we pass in the context, and then we say what we're hard coding exactly what we want that intent to launch, and then we call a start activity. All right, so let's go ahead and run our application and see if this works now. So now we should be able to go to our emulator, and we have our application running. And then we're going ahead and click the menu item again. Here's our menu showing up. And now I click settings, and look at that. We're at our grams per day, where we can set our grams per day. So we went to our preferences menu. So one more time, click menu, click settings, and it takes us to our preferences. So just to recap real quickly on how we did that, let's go and look at our project. The first thing we did was we created our menu file, and we'll be able to use this do the same technique for context menu, but for option menu, we've set that up, and we've set it up in a group. And let me just show you real quick what it would look like if we set the checkable behavior. Actually, for an option menu, if you recall, it's not going to change it. So when we get to context menu, we'll take a look at what the checkable does. But in this case, we had just set up our two items here. We gave them an ID and a title. And of course, you wouldn't hard code the string here, except I'm just doing this as an example. And then in our main activity, we had to overload two methods. The first one was the onCreate options menu, and that we use a menu inflator to grab our resource and inflate our menu, and it adds it to the existing menus. And if this was a base class, of course, if we had a base class, then we could pass it on and it could add its menus. And then we overloaded the second method on option item selected. This passed in the menu item that was selected. We figured out which one it was, and based on that, if it was the settings menu item, we launched the activity. And just to show that this is working, let's just take a look. If we happen to click the help one, which we haven't hooked up, it doesn't do anything. So that's all there is to creating an option menu. It's actually really easy to do. And now let's take a look at context menu.